At 21, Ronaldo was called the Phenomenon, not as marketing, as taxonomy. His body defied the physics of human movement. Defenders couldn't predict his cuts because his central nervous system processed space faster than theirs could react. He moved like the game was playing in slow motion around him. By 26, that same body had ruptured twice, same knee, same tendon. The instrument that made him untouchable had become the thing that ended him. But here's the question. What happens when your identity is built on biological perfection and your biology fails? This isn't about recovery. This isn't about resilience. This is about what happens when the self has no backup plan. When the mind builds itself entirely on what the body can do, every physical limit becomes an existential threat. Most athletes develop identities outside the game. Father, businessman, mentor. Ronaldo didn't. By 17, his ego structure had one load-bearing pillar. The body as instrument. The body as proof. The body is the entire architecture of self. Identity foreclosure, the psychological term for when someone locks into a single self-concept without exploring alternatives. For Ronaldo, there was no exploration. There was only confirmation. Every match, every goal, every defender left frozen reinforced the same message. You are what your body can do. The problem with that architecture, it has no redundancy, no psychological diversification. When the foundation cracks, the entire structure collapses. 1999, Inter Milan. His right knee buckles during a routine match. Patellar tendon rupture. The medical term doesn't capture what actually happened. This wasn't an injury. This was the first time the body said no. And the mind couldn't process it. Because the injury wasn't framed as my knee is damaged. It was experienced as the phenomenon has been contradicted by biology. The psychological response, dissociation. The body stops being me and becomes it. The knee isn't part of Ronaldo. The knee is the thing that failed Ronaldo. This protects the ego. If the body is external, then the phenomenon remains intact, just temporarily trapped in malfunctioning hardware. But dissociation has a cost. You start treating your own biology as an opponent. Rehabilitation becomes warfare. Rest becomes weakness. Pain becomes something to override rather than information to process. What this protected him from? The unbearable reality that peak performance is temporary, that identity built on biology is inherently unstable, that at some point, every athlete becomes a ghost, haunting their own highlight reel. He returned. 2000. World Cup, scored 8 goals, won the tournament. Externally, this looked like triumph. Internally, it was a temporary suspension of the identity crisis. The body had been coerced back into compliance. The phenomenon was restored, but the body remembers, and it doesn't negotiate forever. 2008, AC Milan, same knee, complete patellar tendon rupture. The body's final statement. This time, the dissociation couldn't hold. You can treat one injury as a mechanical failure. 2 injuries to the same structure. That's a pattern. That's the body rejecting the contract. The psychological cost became visible. Weight gain, publicly framed as lack of discipline, actually a somatic marker of a regulatory system that had lost its anchor. When your identity is the body that performs and the body stops performing, the mind has nowhere to land. The smile, Ronaldo's public persona, the charm, the ease. This wasn't authenticity. This was emotional dissociation. The internal collapse separated from the external performance. He could still play the role of Ronaldo, even as the phenomenon was dying inside the broken machine. But here's where the psychological architecture reveals its true nature. His rehabilitation attempts, relentless, obsessive, publicly celebrated as heroic, actually compulsive attempts to restore the only identity structure he had. Rehabilitation wasn't recovery, it was negotiation with the traitor. Every surgery, every session, every attempt to rebuild the knee was really an attempt to resurrect the phenomenon. Not because he loved football, because without football there was no coherent self. The trap. Rehabilitation became another performance arena, another place where the body could fail him. And it did, over and over. Each setback wasn't just physical pain, it was identity erosion. The slow realization that the body would never again be the instrument it once was. The hidden cost. A life spent at war with your own biology. Most people experience their body as part of themselves. Ronaldo experienced his body as the thing that destroyed him, not the opponents, not the injuries themselves. The body, the thing that was supposed to be the foundation, became the enemy. And this is where the psychological architecture reveals its true nature. When your mind refuses to accept limitation, it doesn't change the body's reality. It just makes you a prisoner inside it. The body didn't betray Ronaldo. The foreclosed identity did. The real tragedy isn't the injuries. It's the psychological impossibility of existing outside the phenomenon construct. He never built an exit, never developed a self that could survive without biological dominance. When your mind builds itself on what your body can do, every biological limit becomes an existential threat, not a challenge, a threat, to the core of who you are. Most people never reach the level where their body becomes their enemy. Ronaldo did. And that's not inspiration. That's a case study in the cost of extreme identity foreclosure. The cold truth. He was the phenomenon. Until he wasn't. And then he was nothing. Because the architecture had no backup plan.